The night I lost my baby, my husband told me to mop the floor faster.
If that sentence stopped you, stay with me. Like the video, leave a comment, subscribe if you want to hear how this ends. I'm not asking for sympathy. I'm telling you how a woman disappears and how she comes back without making a sound. My name is Lina Morales. I was 29 that winter, working double shifts as a server at a small family-owned restaurant called Harbor Spoon in Cape May, New Jersey. 12 tables, creaky floors, laminated menus that smelled faintly of bleach. I carried plates, smiled on cue, memorized regulars' orders. I made $3.25 an hour, plus tips. On a good night, I brought home $90. On a bad one, I apologized for things that weren't my fault. I married Daniel Morales when I was 26. He was 32, a delivery supervisor for a regional food distributor. We met when his truck came in late and I stayed to close. He laughed easily then. He held doors. He told me I was steady. He liked that word, steady. It meant I didn't ask for much. Daniel lived with his mother, Patricia Morales, in a narrow 2-story house near the marina. When we married, I moved in. Patricia said it was temporary. Saving money, she called it. Practical. She called herself practical a lot. From the beginning, the house had rules that weren't written down. Shoes lined a certain way. Towels folded a certain way. Dinner at 6, unless Daniel was late, in which case dinner waited, and I apologized to Patricia for letting it cool. If I worked a double, I reheated leftovers quietly and ate standing at the counter. Patricia watched everything. She didn't raise her voice. She didn't have to. Her eyes did the work. If a fork clinked too loudly, she paused. If I laughed too freely, she tilted her head. When Daniel got home, she updated him. Not complaining, reporting. Daniel believed reports. The first shove happened in the kitchen, over a chipped mug. I said sorry. He said, watch where you're going. Patricia said nothing. She turned the page of her magazine. After that, it was easier to be careful than to be safe. I learned how to move without sound, how to read his jaw, how to read her silence. I learned which nights to stay late at work and which nights to come home early and clean. When I found out I was pregnant, it was a Tuesday morning between shifts. The test turned pink in the restaurant bathroom. I sat on the closed toilet lid and pressed my hand to my mouth to keep from smiling too big. I told myself not to celebrate yet. I told myself to be practical. I told Daniel that night. He stared at the wall and nodded once. Patricia asked how far along. When I said 8 weeks, she frowned and said we'd have to be careful about expenses. No congratulations, no questions. She asked if I planned to keep working. I kept working. By 12 weeks, my feet swelled by the end of every shift. Harbor Spoon had no health insurance. I paid for prenatal visits in cash at a clinic 20 minutes inland. The doctor told me to rest. I nodded. I rested in the car before driving home. Daniel started drinking more. Patricia started commenting on my appetite. She said pregnancy wasn't an excuse to be lazy. She said women had done this for centuries. She said her body had bounced back just fine. The night everything broke started with a dinner rush and ended with a spill. I came home late, still wearing my apron. Patricia had left a bucket of soapy water in the hallway. I didn't see it in the dim light. I slipped. The bucket tipped. Water rushed across the floor. Daniel came out of the bedroom. He saw the water. He saw me on the floor, one hand on my stomach. He didn't ask if I was hurt. He said, "Jesus, Lina, look at this mess." I tried to stand. My legs shook. There was pain, low and sharp. Patricia appeared behind him. She sighed. She said, "Clean it up before it soaks the wood." I remember thinking I could fix this. I always thought that. I grabbed the mop. My hands trembled. The pain came in waves. Daniel told me to stop being dramatic. Patricia told him I was always dramatic. I don't remember falling again. I remember the sound of the mop hitting the floor. I remember Daniel swearing. I remember Patricia saying, "Now look what you've done." At the hospital, the nurse spoke softly. The doctor spoke clearly. There was no heartbeat. Daniel paced. Patricia asked how long we'd be there. She said she had work in the morning. I went home alone in the morning. The bed felt enormous. My body felt empty in a way I didn't have words for. Daniel slept. Patricia left a list on the counter. Groceries, laundry, mop the hallway again. No one said I'm sorry. 2 days later, Daniel told me to go back to work. We needed the money, he said. Patricia said staying busy was good for women like me. She said grief made people useless. At Harbor Spoon, I carried plates and smiled. I bled quietly in the bathroom. I counted tips with shaking fingers. I told myself to last the shift. What I didn't know then was that something had shifted. Not inside them. Inside me. I stopped apologizing in my head. I noticed things. Dates, times, the way Patricia's eyes flicked to Daniel before she spoke. The way Daniel repeated her words later as if they were his own. I noticed how often my name came with a sigh. 3 weeks after the hospital, Patricia announced a family dinner. Daniel's brother and his wife were coming. She told me to cook. During dinner, Patricia laughed and said, "Well, at least now we know it wasn't meant to be." Daniel nodded. His brother looked at his plate. His wife looked at me and then away. I felt something settle. Cold. Solid. I excused myself. I went to the bathroom. I locked the door. I looked at my face in the mirror. Pale. Older. That was the moment I stopped waiting for kindness. I didn't scream. I didn't cry. I planned. And I started with something small. Something practical. Something no one noticed. I opened a new email account that night and sent one message to myself. Subject line: dates. The reply came back instantly. Blank. Waiting. So was I. The first thing I learned after the hospital was that pain makes people predictable. Daniel Morales followed patterns. He left for work at 6:10 a.m. He came home between 5:40 and 6:30 p.m., depending on traffic. He drank 2 beers on weeknights, 4 on Fridays. When he was angry, he got loud. When he felt guilty, he got quiet and cruel. Patricia Morales followed rules. She wrote grocery lists in blue ink. She vacuumed on Tuesdays. She watched the same local news channel at exactly 7. She believed control was love, and silence was agreement. I stopped mistaking either for care. At Harbor Spoon, life went on like nothing had happened. The regulars still asked for extra lemon. The cook still burned the toast. The owner, Frank Delaney, still pretended not to notice when the ice machine leaked. I still smiled, still carried plates, still said sorry when customers snapped. But something had changed in how I listened. A week after the miscarriage, Frank pulled me aside near the dish pit. He was in his early 60s, smelled like coffee and fryer oil, and avoided eye contact when conversations got uncomfortable. "You okay, Lena?" he asked. I nodded. "You've been quieter." I forced a small smile. "Just tired." He nodded too quickly. "Take an extra shift off if you need." I thanked him and didn't take the shift off. I needed the hours. I needed the tips. I needed the routine. Routine meant no questions. At home, Patricia began monitoring me more closely. She noticed when I sat down too long. She commented on the cost of pads. She asked if I'd made an appointment to make sure everything was cleaned out. She said it casually, over toast, like she was asking about the weather. Daniel didn't stop her. One night, I was folding laundry when Daniel came into the bedroom. He stood too close. His breath smelled like beer and onions. "You're acting weird," he said. I kept folding. "How?" "You don't flinch anymore." I looked up at him. "Should I?" He stared at me, unsettled. "Don't get smart." I nodded. "Okay." He left the room. The door slammed harder than necessary. I added that to the email draft later. Date, time, words. The clinic gave me paperwork. Discharge summaries, notes. I asked for copies. The receptionist looked surprised but complied. I filed everything in a manila folder I hid under my winter clothes in the back of the closet. I didn't know exactly what I was collecting yet. I just knew it mattered. The first real crack came on a Sunday. Patricia hosted Sunday dinners like rituals. Same menu, same seating, same expectations. That night, Daniel's cousin stopped by unexpectedly. His name was Eric Morales. He worked construction and talked too loud. Patricia loved him because he admired her. During dinner, Eric asked when we were having kids. Patricia answered before I could. "Well, There was a situation. But some women aren't built for it. She smiled when she said it. I put my fork down. Daniel said nothing. Eric laughed awkwardly and changed the subject. After dinner, Patricia followed me into the kitchen. You embarrassed me, she said quietly. I didn't say anything. You made it awkward. I turned to her. I didn't say a word. She leaned closer. Your face did. That night, Daniel cornered me in the hallway. Why do you make things so hard? He said. I met his eyes. I didn't speak. He grabbed my arm. Say something. I pulled my arm free. I will when I need to. His hand came up fast. Not a punch. A slap. Sharp. Controlled. Patricia watched from the doorway. I didn't scream. I didn't cry. I walked into the bathroom and locked the door. My face stung. My heart felt steady. That scared them. The next morning, Patricia left an envelope on the counter. Inside was a printed list. House rules. Revised. Curfew. Chores. No unnecessary doctor visits. No discussions of personal matters outside the family. At the bottom, she'd written, "This is for your own good." I folded the paper and put it in my bag. At work, my coworker Mia Reynolds noticed the mark on my cheek. She was 24, sharp-tongued, saving for nursing school. You okay? She asked. I nodded. You sure? I looked at her. No. She waited. My husband and his mother, I said carefully. Things are bad. She didn't gasp. She didn't offer platitudes. My sister left her husband last year, she said. Different reasons. Same look. She wrote something on a receipt and slid it to me. That's a legal aid clinic in Atlantic City. Free consultations, just in case. I didn't thank her too much. I didn't promise anything. But I kept the paper. That night, Daniel accused me of poisoning people against him. You told Mia, didn't you? I shook my head. She saw. Patricia called me ungrateful. She said she took me in. She said I owed her obedience. That word stayed with me. Obedience. It wasn't love. It wasn't family. It was ownership. 2 days later, Patricia took my phone while I showered. She said she needed to check something. When I asked what, Daniel told me not to argue. I bought a prepaid phone with tip money and hid it in my locker at work. Small. Practical. One afternoon, while Patricia napped, I took photos of the envelope, the list, the dates, the bruises that hadn't fully faded. I sent them to the new email account. Subject line, evidence. I didn't know yet what I'd do with it. But I knew one thing. They believed I had nowhere to go. They believed I had no leverage. They believed silence meant submission. That belief was about to cost them more than they could imagine. Because the next thing I planned wasn't leaving. It was staying just long enough to make sure the truth couldn't be buried with me. And I had already chosen the moment to begin. I learned quickly that staying alert was safer than staying hopeful. By the 4th week after the hospital, my body had stopped bleeding. But my nerves hadn't caught up. Every sound in the house registered too loud. Every pause felt loaded. I moved carefully, not to avoid conflict, but to observe it. Observation was power. I hadn't known that before. Daniel Morales started coming home later. When I asked where he'd been, he said work. When I asked which route he took, he said, don't interrogate me. Patricia Morales watched those exchanges with interest, not concern. She liked information asymmetry. She liked knowing more than everyone else. I began keeping a notebook at work, tucked inside the server station drawer beneath the receipt tape. It looked like a shift log. In reality, it was a timeline. Dates, times, words, witnesses. On March 11th, Daniel slapped me at 9:14 p.m. Patricia, present. No attempt to intervene. On March 13th, Patricia confiscated my phone at 7:42 a.m. Returned it, with messages deleted. On March 16th, Daniel grabbed my wrist hard enough to leave marks, because dinner was late. I wrote facts only, no adjectives, no emotion. That mattered. At Harbor Spoon, I started picking up extra shifts, doubles whenever Frank would allow it. My tips went into a separate envelope I hid behind the spare tire in my car. Cash didn't leave trails, Mia Reynolds noticed. You're running yourself into the ground, she said one night as we wiped down tables. I shrugged. Temporary. She studied me. Temporary is how people survive things that shouldn't last. I didn't answer. Instead, I asked her about the legal aid clinic again. She gave me the name this time, Atlantic Shore Legal Services. I memorized it. At home, Patricia escalated quietly. She started checking my bag when I came in. She commented on how long my shifts were taking. She suggested I might be flirting with customers. She asked Daniel if he trusted me. He didn't answer her questions directly. He just watched me differently afterward. One night, Patricia called me into the living room. "Sit." I sat. She held a folder. My clinic paperwork. The copies I thought I'd hidden. "I found these while cleaning," she said. I didn't argue. "You didn't tell us everything," she continued. "About the doctor visits, about what they said." I met her eyes. "They said I lost the pregnancy." She pursed her lips. "They also said stress can cause complications." Daniel shifted in his chair. "What are you saying?" he asked. Patricia turned to him. "I'm saying some women bring these things on themselves." Daniel's jaw tightened. He looked at me. "What were you doing wrong?" I felt something settle in my chest. Not pain, recognition. This was the narrative they'd chosen. I stood. "I'm going to bed." Patricia's voice sharpened. "Sit back down." I didn't. Daniel stood up fast. He blocked my path. "You don't walk away when my mother is talking." I stepped to the side. I just did. His hand came up again. This time, I caught his wrist. I didn't squeeze. I didn't twist. I held. He froze. Patricia inhaled sharply. "Let go of him," she snapped. I released his wrist and walked past them. In the bathroom, I locked the door and leaned against it, breathing slowly. I didn't cry. I emailed myself the date and time. The next morning, Daniel didn't speak to me. Patricia made breakfast loudly, slamming drawers, making a show of domestic efficiency. Silence, weaponized. I went to work early. Frank noticed the bruise on my wrist. "Lena," he said quietly, "you sure you're okay?" I met his eyes. "No." He hesitated. "My sister volunteers at a shelter in Wildwood. If you ever need..." I cut him off gently. "Not yet." He nodded, respecting that boundary. That afternoon, while Patricia was out and Daniel was asleep, I searched the house. Not recklessly, methodically. In the filing cabinet under old tax returns, I found bank statements, joint accounts, credit cards in Daniel's name, a small loan Patricia had taken out against the house years ago. Payments irregular, late fees. In Daniel's desk, I found a folded notice from his employer. A warning. Delivery discrepancies. Missing inventory. I photographed everything. I didn't steal. I didn't move anything. I left it exactly as I found it. That evening, Patricia announced that Daniel's aunt would be staying with us for a week. Extra eyes. Extra pressure. She framed it as help. I nodded. Inside, I adjusted my timeline. The next day, I took a long break between shifts and drove to Atlantic City. Atlantic Shore Legal Services was on the second floor of a building that smelled like old carpet and disinfectant. The intake counselor's name was Rachel Kim. She was calm, direct. She didn't rush me. "Are you in immediate danger?" she asked. "Not today," I said. She nodded. "That matters." I showed her the photos, the notes, the clinic paperwork, the list of house rules. She didn't react. She listened. "You're documenting coercive control," she said, "and physical abuse, and housing dependency." I nodded. "What do you want?" she asked. I thought carefully. "I want options." She smiled slightly. "We can do that." She explained restraining orders, emergency housing, financial protections, how marital property worked in New Jersey, what evidence mattered, what didn't. She didn't tell me what to do. She gave me a map. When I left, I felt taller. At home, Daniel accused me of being out all afternoon. "I was working," I said. He didn't believe me. Patricia said I was getting ideas. I was. That night, as I lay in bed listening to Daniel's breathing, I made a decision. I wouldn't leave in the middle of the night. I wouldn't disappear quietly. I would leave in a way that made it impossible for them to rewrite the story, because I understood something now. They weren't afraid of losing me. They were afraid of losing control of the narrative. And once that narrative broke, everything else would follow. The timing had to be right. The witnesses had to be in place. The truth had to arrive all at once. And I had already chosen the day. They just didn't know it yet. Once you decide to leave on your own terms, time changes shape. Days stop blending together. Hours become deliberate. Every interaction feels like a rehearsal for something that hasn't happened yet, but will. Patricia Morales' sister arrived on a Thursday afternoon. Her name was Evelyn Cruz, and she brought 2 suitcases, a plastic container of homemade flan, and a voice that filled rooms whether it was wanted or not. She kissed Daniel on the cheek, hugged Patricia, and looked at me like she was measuring fabric. "So you're the wife," she said. "Daniel told me you work a lot." I nodded. "Someone has to." She laughed, like it was a joke. Patricia didn't. That week, the house felt smaller. Eyes everywhere. Commentary on everything. Patricia and Evelyn spoke in Spanish when they wanted to exclude me, switching back to English just long enough to make a point. Daniel watched it all, energized by the attention. He liked having an audience. On Saturday, Patricia announced that her church group was coming over the following weekend. A fundraiser planning meeting. Women from the neighborhood, coffee, baked goods, respectability. "You'll help," she said. It wasn't a request. I nodded. Inside, I marked the calendar. Sunday afternoon, 12 people minimum. Witnesses. At Harbor Spoon, I asked Frank for the morning off that day. He raised an eyebrow. "Everything okay?" I met his eyes. "I need to handle something personal." He nodded. "Take what you need." That mattered more than he knew. At home, the abuse shifted tone. Less physical, more psychological. Patricia criticized my posture, my tone, the way I folded napkins. Daniel mocked my grief openly, especially when Evelyn was in the room. "You still hung up on that?" he said one night. "It was weeks ago," Patricia chimed in. "Dwelling is unhealthy." I said nothing. Silence, when chosen, is not surrender. It's containment. 2 nights before the church meeting, Daniel came home drunk. Evelyn was already asleep. Patricia watched television in the living room. He cornered me in the kitchen. "You think you're smarter than us now?" he said. I didn't answer. He leaned in close. "I can feel it. You're planning something." I met his eyes. "You should go to bed." His hand twitched. Patricia called from the couch. "Daniel, don't start. You have work tomorrow." He stepped back, annoyed. Not because he cared about my safety, because he hated being managed. That night, I packed a bag and left it in the trunk of my car. Clothes, documents, the manila folder, cash, the prepaid phone. Not because I was leaving then, because I was ready. On Sunday morning, the house filled with noise and perfume and casseroles. Women from Patricia's church arrived in waves. They complimented her curtains. They praised her baking. They asked me where I was from and how long we'd been married. Patricia smiled like a saint. Daniel sat in the corner with his phone, pretending not to listen. I moved through the room serving coffee, refilling sugar bowls, absorbing small talk. My body felt calm. That surprised me. At one point, Patricia clinked her spoon against her cup. "I just want to thank everyone for coming," she said. "Family is such a blessing, especially when we support each other through difficult times." Several women nodded. She glanced at me. Some people struggle with gratitude, with responsibility, but with guidance, they can improve. The room went quiet. I set the coffee pot down. "Actually, Patricia," I said evenly, "there's something I need to say." Her smile froze. Daniel looked up. I turned to the room. "My name is Lena Morales. I'm Daniel's wife. I work as a server at Harbor Spoon. I lost my pregnancy 6 weeks ago after repeated stress and physical harm in this house." Gasps, sharp inhales, chairs shifting. Patricia stood up. "What are you talking about?" I continued. "I have medical records, photos, dates. I have witnesses. I've been told to stay quiet, to be grateful, to endure." Daniel stood. "Lena, stop." I looked at him. No. One of the women near the window covered her mouth. I was slapped in this house. Controlled, monitored, blamed for my miscarriage. I've been told my grief is inconvenient, and my body is a problem. Patricia's voice rose. "You are lying. You are sick." I pulled the folder from my bag. "These are copies. The originals are already with a legal aid clinic. So is a report." The room erupted. Daniel lunged toward me. 2 women stood up instinctively. One grabbed his arm. "Sit down," she snapped. Evelyn came running from the hallway. "What's happening?" Patricia looked panicked. "She's trying to destroy us." I spoke calmly. "I'm telling the truth." I turned to one woman I recognized, Margaret Heller. She volunteered at the hospital. "Margaret," I said, You saw me there. She nodded slowly. I did. Silence fell again. I didn't stay for questions. I picked up my bag, walked past Daniel, and out the door. No one followed me. Outside, the air felt sharp and clean. I sat in my car and breathed. My phone buzzed. A text from Rachel Kim at Atlantic Shore Legal Services. "Are you safe?" I typed back. "I am now." By the time Daniel realized I wasn't coming back, it was already too late. Patricia's church had questions. Daniel's brother had heard. Harbor Spoon knew. The narrative was no longer theirs. That night, I slept in a motel near the highway. Cheap, clean, anonymous. I didn't cry. I stared at the ceiling and thought about what came next. Leaving was only the first step. The next part would be slower, more controlled, and it would hurt them far more than my silence ever did. Because the truth, once spoken out loud, doesn't go back into hiding. And I had only just begun to use it. The motel room smelled like detergent and something older underneath it. The kind of place people stayed when they didn't want to be remembered. That suited me. I woke before dawn, fully dressed, shoes still on. My phone was silent. No messages from Daniel, no calls from Patricia. That told me everything I needed to know. They weren't worried about me. They were worried about what I'd said. I checked out at 6:03 a.m., paid cash, and drove straight to work. Harbor Spoon was already alive with the clatter of pans and the low hum of the prep radio. Frank Delaney looked up when I walked in. He took one look at my face and didn't ask questions. "You want coffee?" he said. "Yes." He poured it without charging me. Mia Reynolds came in 10 minutes later. She froze when she saw me behind the counter. "Did you leave?" I nodded. She exhaled like she'd been holding her breath for weeks. Good. That was it. No follow-up, no interrogation, just good. During the breakfast rush, my phone buzzed. A text from an unknown number. "You embarrassed us. Come home now." I deleted it. Another buzz. A voicemail this time. Patricia's voice. Controlled. Tight. "Lena, you need to come back immediately. This is unacceptable behavior. We can handle this privately." I saved it. Documentation mattered. At 9:12 a.m., Daniel called. I didn't answer. He left a message. "You think you've won something? You've ruined everything. You're not safe out there. Come back and we'll talk." I saved that too. After my shift, I drove to Atlantic Shore Legal Services. Rachel Kim was already expecting me. She ushered me into a small office and closed the door. "You did the disclosure," she said calmly. I nodded. "Public," she said. "With witnesses." "Yes." She didn't smile, but her eyes softened. "That changes things." She explained the next steps. Temporary restraining order, emergency housing options, how to file for separation, how to protect my wages, what to do if Daniel showed up at work. She didn't rush. She didn't dramatize. She treated me like someone capable of understanding her own life. That felt new. By noon, I had paperwork in motion. Not filed yet. Prepared. Ready. Rachel leaned back in her chair. "You know they'll try to reframe this," she said. I nodded. "They already are." Expect apologies, anger, pressure, offers, threats. Sometimes all in the same day. I thought of Patricia's face in the living room, the way her composure cracked. "I'm not going back." "Good," Rachel said. Then we moved forward. I left the office with copies in my bag and a list of shelters I hoped not to need. Outside, the sun felt too bright. The world moved like nothing had happened. That afternoon, I got a message from Frank. "Take tomorrow off. Paid. Don't argue." I didn't. I checked into a longer-term motel near Wildwood. Weekly rate, no questions. I unpacked my bag slowly, placing things where I could see them. Order steadied me. That night, my phone exploded. Daniel, Patricia, unknown numbers. One from Evelyn Cruz. "You humiliated your family," she wrote. "You'll regret this." I blocked her. Then came something different. A message from Margaret Heller, the woman from church. "Lena, I hope you're safe. If you need someone to talk to or a ride somewhere, I'm here." I stared at the screen for a long moment. Then I replied, "Thank you. I'm okay for now." That was the truth. The next morning, I went back to Atlantic City and filed for a temporary restraining order. The judge on duty was a woman in her 50s, with tired eyes and a steady voice. She reviewed the documentation, the photos, the timeline. She granted it, without comment. When I stepped outside, the paper felt heavier than it should have. Protection always does. By noon, Daniel had been served. I knew because my phone rang immediately afterward. "You did this?" he shouted when I answered. "You went to court?" I didn't raise my voice. "I did. You're destroying my life." I hung up. That afternoon, Patricia showed up at Harbor Spoon. Mia saw her first and came straight to Frank. "She's here." Frank didn't hesitate. He stepped out front and blocked the door. "You can't be here," he said. Patricia smiled thinly. "I'm here to see my daughter-in-law." Frank shook his head. "You're here to cause a scene. Take it somewhere else." She started to argue. Customers stared. Frank didn't budge. She left. When I heard about it later, something inside me loosened. The next few days passed in fragments. Meetings, forms, calls. I slept lightly. I ate when I remembered to. Then came the first apology. Daniel emailed from a new address. "I'm sorry things got out of hand. We both said things. We both made mistakes. Let's be adults and talk this through." I read it twice. He didn't mention the slap, the shove, the miscarriage, the rules, the silence. That told me everything. Patricia followed with a handwritten note, delivered by certified mail. "I never meant to hurt you. Families say things they don't mean. You're overreacting because of grief. Come home and we'll start fresh." I didn't respond. Instead, I did something else. I went back to the clinic. I requested my full medical file. Not summaries, not notes, everything. The receptionist raised an eyebrow. "Legal reasons?" she asked. "Yes." She nodded and made copies. That afternoon, I met Rachel again. I handed her the file. "There's more," I said. "About the environment, the stress, the timing." She reviewed the documents. "This supports your claim," she said. "Not causation, but contribution." I nodded. "What does that mean?" "It means if they push back, they'll have to answer questions they don't want asked." "Good." Rachel studied me. "You're not doing this for revenge, are you?" I thought about that. "No," I said. "I'm doing it so they can't do this to someone else and call it normal." She nodded once. That's usually when things get serious. That night, alone in the motel room, I opened my laptop and began writing a statement. Not for court, for myself. I wrote what happened, not how it felt, what happened. When I finished, I saved it. Subject line: truth. Outside, someone laughed in the parking lot. A car drove by with music playing. Life, continuing. I lay back on the bed and stared at the ceiling. They thought my silence had protected them. They were wrong. It had protected me. And now that it was gone, they were about to learn how exposed they really were. Because the next step wasn't survival. It was accountability. And I was done being careful about who that made uncomfortable. Once accountability enters the room, everything else gets louder. Not arguments, not threats, reactions. By the second week after I left, the tone of the messages changed. Daniel stopped apologizing and started negotiating. Patricia stopped negotiating and started blaming. "You owe us an explanation. You ruined our reputation. You misunderstood everything." I saved every message. I didn't respond. Silence, this time, was not containment. It was strategy. Atlantic Shore Legal Services helped me file for legal separation. The paperwork was precise. Names spelled correctly. Dates exact. There was comfort in that. Precision doesn't allow reinterpretation. Rachel Kim walked me through it line by line. "You don't need to prove they're monsters," she said. "You only need to prove what happened." That distinction mattered. At Harbor Spoon, Frank adjusted my schedule without being asked. More lunch shifts, fewer late nights. He didn't announce it, he just did it. Mia covered when she could. Other servers stopped asking questions and started watching the door. Word travels fast in small towns. Daniel tried once to show up at work again. This time, the restraining order was active. Frank called the police before Daniel finished crossing the sidewalk. Daniel left without incident. He didn't come back. That was the moment he understood. Something had changed. Patricia took longer. She started calling mutual acquaintances, church members, distant relatives. She framed it carefully. "Lena is unwell. Grief does things to people. She's confused. We're worried." The story was almost convincing, until it wasn't. Margaret Heller stopped answering Patricia's calls. So did 2 other women from the church meeting. The silence that followed wasn't punishment. It was assessment. People were comparing notes. I didn't participate in that comparison. I didn't need to. One afternoon, I received a message from Evelyn Cruz. "You think you're clever," she wrote. "You think paperwork will save you? Daniel is still your husband." I replied with one sentence. "The court disagrees." Then I blocked her. That night, I moved out of the motel and into a small room above a retired couple's garage. Month to month. No lease pressure. The woman, Carol Whitman, handed me a key and said the words I hadn't heard in months. "Take your time." The room was plain. A bed, a dresser, a small desk by the window. I slept 8 hours the first night. Dreamless. In the mornings, I walked before work. Not fast, not far. Just enough to feel my body moving because I chose to. The next escalation came quietly. Rachel called me midweek. "Patricia contacted the clinic," she said. I stopped walking. "About what?" She requested records. Claimed family concern. I closed my eyes. "They didn't release anything," Rachel continued. "But she's testing boundaries." I nodded. "What do? We document it. And we prepare." Prepare for what? For them to overreach. They always do. At Harper's Spoon, business slowed after tourist season ended. Tips dropped. Frank sat me down one afternoon. "I can keep your hours steady," he said, "but winter's tight." I understood. "I've been thinking about picking up catering shifts," I said. He nodded. "I can connect you." That mattered too. Not charity. Options. 2 days later, Daniel's employer called me. The man introduced himself as Carl Benson, operations manager. He sounded nervous. "We received notice of a restraining order," he said. "It names our employee." I waited. "There are concerns about workplace conduct. If you have information relevant to safety," I didn't volunteer anything. "You should speak to our legal department," I said calmly. There was a pause. "Understood." When I hung up, my hands shook. Not fear. Release. That call wasn't about me. It was about consequences arriving where Daniel couldn't control them. By Friday, Daniel emailed again. Different tone. "I'm under review at work. Did you talk to them?" I replied. "I followed the law." That was all. Patricia sent a longer message that night. No accusations, just memory. "I took you in. I fed you. I treated you like family. This is how you repay me?" I read it twice. Then I archived it. I wasn't repaying anything. I was exiting a debt that had never been legitimate. The following week, the temporary restraining order hearing was scheduled. I dressed carefully. Neutral colors, closed-toe shoes. Not to perform respectability, to reduce distraction. Daniel arrived late. His attorney was younger than Rachel and less prepared. Patricia sat behind him, rigid. The judge listened. Rachel spoke when needed. I answered questions when asked. I did not editorialize. Patricia tried once to interrupt. The judge raised a hand. "Ma'am, this is not your proceeding." Patricia fell silent. The order was extended. Outside the courtroom, Daniel looked smaller. "This didn't have to go this far," he said. I looked at him. It went exactly as far as it needed to. I walked away. That afternoon, I received a call from the clinic. They'd noted Patricia's inquiry and flagged my file. They asked if I wanted to add a privacy alert. "Yes," I said. "Done. Boundaries. Formalized." At home, in my small rented room, I opened my laptop and reviewed the timeline again. Dates, messages, photos, witnesses. It wasn't a story anymore. It was a record. And records have weight. I realized then that what frightened them wasn't exposure. It was permanence. The fact that what they'd done could no longer be reframed as misunderstanding or family conflict. It had names, documents, a file number. The next phase would take long, not louder, longer. Because once institutions are involved, time favors the prepared. And I was prepared. I closed the laptop and sat quietly, listening to the hum of the heater. I wasn't waiting for them to apologize. I was waiting for the moment they realized they couldn't undo what they'd set in motion. That moment was coming. I could feel it. And when it arrived, I would be exactly where I was now, standing still, watching, ready, Power doesn't disappear when it's challenged. It adapts. By December, Daniel Morales had stopped contacting me directly. That didn't mean he'd accepted anything. It meant he'd handed the work to someone else. The first letter arrived on a Monday. Cream-colored envelope, law firm letterhead. His attorney, Gregory Shaw, informed me that Daniel was disputing the restraining order and intended to challenge the narrative I had presented. Narrative. I smiled when I read that word. They still thought this was a story problem. Rachel Kim didn't smile. "This is standard pressure," she said when I forwarded it. "They're testing your stamina." "I'm not tired," I said. She nodded. "That's good, because they are." At work, winter settled in fully. Harbor Spoon ran shorter hours. Frank gave me what he could, but the reality was simple. I needed something more stable. I found it in an unexpected place. One of the regulars, a woman named Denise Walker, lingered after lunch one afternoon. She'd been coming in every Thursday for years. Black coffee, grilled cheese, no fuss. "You ever done banquet work?" she asked casually. I shook my head. "I manage a small hotel on the boardwalk," she said. "We need someone reliable for events. Weekends mostly. Pays better than this place." I didn't hesitate. "Yes," she smiled. "Good. You start Friday." That night, I updated my budget. Between Harbor Spoon and the hotel, I could cover rent, food, and still save a little. Stability. Earned. Daniel's attorney filed a motion to reduce the restraining order scope. Patricia submitted a written statement. It described me as emotionally fragile, prone to exaggeration, influenced by outsiders. Rachel read it out loud to me once. "How do you feel?" she asked. I thought for a moment. Relieved. She raised an eyebrow. "They're contradicting themselves," I said. "And they're doing it on record." She smiled then. "Exactly. At the hotel, I worked weddings, corporate retreats, holiday parties. I blended into the background. Black uniform, hair pulled back, efficient, invisible in the way service workers often are. I liked that invisibility now, because it let me listen. People talked freely around servers, about deals, about mistakes, about who was struggling at work and who was covering for whom. One Saturday night, I overheard two men discussing Daniel's company. Inventory losses, internal reviews, an audit rumored but not announced. I didn't react. I didn't need to. The information confirmed what I already knew. Pressure was spreading outward. Patricia tried once more to regain control. She sent a Christmas card. Family photo, smiling faces, a handwritten note inside. "This doesn't have to be permanent." I didn't throw it away. I placed it in the folder. Evidence of minimization matters. The hearing date approached. Daniel's demeanor changed again. His emails became curt, procedural. He stopped addressing me by name. That was fine. At the courthouse, the atmosphere was different this time. Fewer people, less tension. Daniel avoided my eyes. Patricia sat rigid, her hands clenched in her lap. The judge reviewed the filings. "Mr. Morales," she said, "your request hinges on the claim that the petitioner exaggerated harm. Yet your own submissions acknowledge repeated conflicts and physical contact." Daniel's attorney shifted. "The court finds no basis to reduce the order at this time." Denied. Patricia inhaled sharply. Outside, Daniel followed me to the stairs. "You've made your point," he said. "This is getting out of hand." I turned to face him. "It got out of hand when you thought you could control me without consequence." He stared at me, searching for something. "You think you're winning." I shook my head. "I'm not competing." I walked away. That night, back in my small room, I realized something important. I wasn't waiting for a final blow. I wasn't building toward a dramatic reveal. What I was doing was letting systems do what they're designed to do when given accurate information. Slowly, impersonally, irreversibly. The next morning, Rachel called. "Daniel's employer has initiated a formal review," she said. "It's not public, but it's serious." I closed my eyes briefly. "Okay." She paused. "You're handling this well." I thought about that. I'm handling it honestly. That was the difference. Later that week, I received a message from someone I didn't expect. Daniel's sister-in-law, Marisol Alvarez. She'd been quiet at the dinner, avoidant, observant. "I'm sorry I didn't speak up sooner," she wrote. "I didn't know what to do. I still don't. But I believe you." I stared at the message. Belief wasn't something I needed anymore, but accountability often starts there. "Thank you," I replied. "Take care of yourself." She responded with a single heart. I didn't save that one. Not everything needs to be preserved. As December closed, I felt something steady settle in my chest. Not relief. Momentum. They had fewer moves left. I had patience. And patience, when backed by truth and documentation, is devastatingly effective. Because the next thing that would happen wouldn't come from me. It would come from a place they couldn't argue with. A workplace, a court, a file. And when it arrived, it would arrive without emotion, just like I had learned to do. Quietly, completely. Institutions don't announce themselves when they begin to move. They send emails with neutral subject lines. They schedule meetings without context. They ask for cooperation. In early January, Daniel Morales' company did all three. I didn't hear it from him. I heard it from Carl Benson again, the operations manager, calling with a different tone than before. "Ms. Morales," he said, "we're conducting an internal audit related to inventory discrepancies and employee conduct. We may need a statement from you regarding any interactions relevant to workplace safety." I kept my voice even. "You should coordinate through my attorney." "Of course," he said quickly. When the call ended, I sat still for a long moment. This wasn't revenge. This was consequence. At the hotel, January meant conferences instead of weddings. Fewer smiles. More whispered complaints about budgets and layoffs. I did my job. I listened. I went home. One afternoon, Denise Walker pulled me aside. "You're solid," she said. "We're extending your hours, and I want you trained as a shift lead." I blinked. "I've only been here a few weeks." She smiled. "That's long enough to see who shows up." That night, I added the raise to my budget. It wasn't dramatic. It was sustainable. That mattered more. Rachel Kim called 2 days later. Daniel's attorney filed another motion, she said. This time, claiming emotional distress caused by reputational harm. I laughed once. Quietly. "He's saying you harmed him by speaking the truth in a protected context," she continued. "It won't hold, but it tells me something." "What?" "He's running out of leverage." Patricia Morales tried a different approach. She showed up where she knew I'd be. The grocery store near my rooming house. Tuesday afternoon. I was reaching for bread when I felt her presence before I saw her. "Lena," she said softly. I didn't turn. "We need to talk." I placed the loaf in my basket and faced her. "You're not supposed to contact me." "I'm not threatening you," she said quickly. "I'm just a mother trying to keep her family together." Her voice shook. It was the first time I'd seen that. "This has gone too far," she continued. "Daniel is under review. People are asking questions. You don't understand what you're doing." I looked at her. "I understand exactly what I'm doing." She reached for my arm. I stepped back. "You raised him to believe control was normal," I said. Silence was consent. That harm could be reframed as concern. Her mouth opened, closed. That story worked until it didn't. She lowered her hand. "What do you want?" I thought carefully. "Distance." She stared at me. "That's it?" "Yes." I walked away. Outside, my hands shook. Not fear, adrenaline. It passed quickly. The following week, the audit became public. Not sensational, just a brief mention in a local business bulletin. Inventory mismanagement. Supervisor review. Ongoing investigation. Daniel's name wasn't printed, but everyone knew. My phone buzzed constantly that day. Unknown numbers, blocked IDs. I didn't answer. Rachel sent one message: "Stay steady." I was. At Harbor Spoon, Frank pulled me aside. "You okay?" he asked. "Yes." "Good," because someone came asking questions. I didn't say anything. I nodded. "Thank you." He shrugged. People should mind their business. By mid-January, Daniel's emails stopped entirely. Patricia sent one last message. "You've destroyed everything we built." I archived it. Because what she meant was control. And control doesn't rebuild. It only tightens until something breaks. At the hotel, I was promoted officially. Shift lead. Small raise. Authority limited, but real. I trained 2 new hires. I corrected schedules. I enforced policies without apologizing. One night, after a long conference dinner, a guest grabbed my wrist when I told him the bar was closed. I removed his hand, calmly. "Do not touch me," I said. He laughed. Denise appeared behind me instantly. "Sir, you're done here." Security escorted him out. Denise turned to me. "You handled that well." I nodded. "I've had practice." Later that week, Rachel called again. The audit uncovered falsified delivery logs, she said. Daniel's involvement is being reviewed. I closed my eyes. What happens next? That's up to his employer. But it's not minor. I thanked her and hung up. That night, alone in my room, I opened the folder and reviewed everything one last time. The list, the photos, the notes, the messages. I realized something then. I didn't need to add anything else. The record was complete. The next morning, I received an email from Gregory Shaw, Daniel's attorney. Subject: settlement discussion. I forwarded it to Rachel without opening it. She replied an hour later. Will respond. Carefully. By the end of the week, Daniel was suspended, pending investigation. It wasn't dramatic. No sirens, no headlines. Just an email. A badge deactivated. A meeting scheduled. Patricia stopped attending church. Margaret Heller told me quietly that people were asking questions Patricia couldn't answer without lying. I didn't take satisfaction in that. I took note. On Sunday evening, I walked along the boardwalk alone. The ocean was gray, the air sharp. I breathed deeply. For the first time since the hospital, I felt my body relax completely. Not because justice had been served, because my life was no longer paused, waiting for someone else to decide its value. My phone buzzed. A message from Rachel. Settlement offer incoming tomorrow. Significant. I looked out at the water. Okay, I typed back. I knew what that meant. They were ready to close the file. But I wasn't done yet, because the next decision wasn't about what I could get. It was about what I would accept. And that choice would determine whether this ended as a transaction or as a line that could never be crossed again. I turned back toward the street, my steps steady. Tomorrow would ask a question. I already knew my answer. Settlement language is designed to sound generous. Carefully chosen words, neutral tone, phrases like mutual resolution and no admission of wrongdoing. It arrives wrapped in civility, asking you to mistake closure for justice. Rachel Kim forwarded the offer early Monday morning. I read it twice before calling her. They want confidentiality, I said. She confirmed. Non-disclosure, non-disparagement, standard terms, financial compensation, expedited separation. I leaned back in my chair and stared at the ceiling. How much? I asked. She told me the number. It was enough to pay debts, enough to relocate, enough to start clean. It was not enough to erase what happened. What do you want to do? Rachel asked. I thought about Patricia Morales standing in the grocery store aisle, asking what I wanted, as if distance were a threat instead of a boundary. I thought about Daniel Morales telling me I'd ruined everything, when all I'd done was stop absorbing harm quietly. I want to remove the silence clause, I said. Rachel paused. That's unusual. I know. Without it, they won't agree. Then they won't agree. She was quiet for a moment. If we do this, they may walk. I understood. Let them. Rachel exhaled slowly. Okay, I'll revise. That afternoon, Daniel emailed me directly for the first time in weeks. We don't need to drag this out, he wrote. You've made your point. Take the deal and move on. I didn't reply. Instead, I went to work. The hotel hosted a regional sales conference that night. Long hours, tight schedules, controlled chaos. I moved through it smoothly, checking lists, redirecting staff, fixing small problems before they grew. Denise pulled me aside near the end of the night. You handle pressure well, she said. Ever thought about operations management? I smiled faintly. I'm thinking about a lot of things. She nodded. When you're ready, talk to me. That stayed with me. The next morning, Rachel called. They rejected the revision, she said. I expected that. They insist on full confidentiality. I thought for a moment. Then we don't settle. She didn't hesitate. Understood. Within hours, Daniel's attorney sent a follow-up. Softer tone. Partial compromise. Reduced scope of non-disclosure. Still silence, I said. Rachel agreed. We countered again. This time, Daniel called me himself. His voice was tight. Why are you doing this? He asked. You're dragging my name through the mud. I stayed calm. You did that. He scoffed. You're acting like a victim. I didn't raise my voice. I was one. Silence stretched between us. What do you want? He finally asked. I answered honestly. I want to speak about my life without asking your permission. He laughed bitterly. You're going to ruin me. I ended the call. That afternoon, the audit findings were finalized. Daniel was terminated. Not for abuse, for falsified records and supervisory negligence. Clean, administrative, final. Rachel forwarded the notice. This changes their leverage, she said. It did. The settlement offer returned that evening. Higher, fewer conditions. Still one clause remained. No public statements. I read it slowly. Then I wrote one sentence. Remove all restrictions on my speech. Rachel called immediately. Are you sure? Yes. If they walk, this goes to trial. I know. She paused. Then she smiled. Okay. The response came the next morning. Accepted. No confidentiality. No silence. No control. Just a financial settlement and legal separation finalized. When I signed, my hand didn't shake. I didn't feel triumphant. I felt done. Patricia sent one final message that afternoon. You could have handled this privately. I replied with one line. I tried. Then I blocked her. At work, life went on. Schedules, staff meetings, inventory counts. I was offered a permanent position, operations assistant, salary, benefits. I accepted. That weekend, I packed my few belongings and moved into a small apartment near the water. 1 bedroom. Clean lines. Light. I hung nothing on the walls yet. Some things take time. On Sunday evening, I sat on the floor with a cup of tea and opened my laptop. I wrote an account of what happened. Not names, not accusations, just facts. Process. What coercive control looks like when it wears a family face. I didn't post it yet. I wasn't in a hurry. The power of truth isn't in how fast it's spoken. It's in how clearly it stands when questioned. I closed the laptop and looked around the room. Quiet. Chosen. Safe. My phone buzzed. A message from Marisol Alvarez. I heard Daniel lost his job. I'm sorry. And I'm glad you're okay. I typed back. I am. Outside, the ocean moved steadily, indifferent to everything that had once felt urgent. There was only one chapter left, not about them. About me deciding what kind of voice I wanted to use, now that no one could take it from me. And that decision would shape everything that followed. Once the legal noise stopped, the quiet felt different. Not empty, not fragile, just honest. The settlement closed without ceremony. Papers signed, accounts transferred. A final email from Rachel Kim confirming completion. No congratulations, no commentary. Just confirmation that something irreversible had been finished. I didn't celebrate. I went to work. The hotel promoted me officially at the start of February. Operations assistant, full-time, benefits. A desk that was actually mine. A key card with my name printed cleanly across the front. Denise Walker shook my hand. You earned this, she said. Not because of what you survived, because of how you work. That distinction mattered. My days filled with structure, scheduling vendors, reviewing incident reports, managing staff conflicts. I learned how to say no without apology, how to correct without humiliating, how to hold standards without performing authority. People responded to that. In the evenings, I came home to my apartment. I cooked simple meals. I slept deeply. I stopped checking the locks twice. The first time I noticed that, I paused. Healing isn't dramatic. It's the absence of habits you no longer need. One afternoon, while reviewing contracts, I received an email notification. A public post. Someone had tagged me. It was a local community group discussing domestic abuse awareness. Someone had shared an anonymized account. Mine. I clicked the link. The words were familiar. The structure. The facts. The tone. Rachel had asked weeks ago if she could use my case, stripped of identifiers, for training material. I'd agreed. The comments underneath were quiet, thoughtful. People sharing their own stories. Others asking questions. No outrage, no spectacle. That felt right. I didn't engage. I let the words stand on their own. A few days later, Frank Delaney stopped by the hotel for a conference lunch. He recognized me immediately. Look at you, he said. Desk job. I smiled. I still know how to carry plates. He laughed. Good. Because you always carried more than that. Before he left, he hesitated. I'm glad you didn't disappear, he said. Some people do. I nodded. I almost did. But I didn't owe anyone my vanishing. That night, My phone buzzed with a number I didn't recognize. It was Evelyn Cruz. I stared at the screen until it stopped ringing. She texted, instead, "Your silence won't fix what you broke." I didn't respond. Some people think consequences are a negotiation. They aren't. A week later, I ran into Margaret Heller at the pharmacy. She smiled warmly. "You look well," she said. "I feel well." She nodded. Patricia stopped coming to church. People noticed. I shrugged slightly. "That's her choice." Margaret studied me for a moment. "You did the right thing." I didn't correct her. Right and necessary aren't always the same, but sometimes they overlap. As winter faded, I started volunteering once a month at a local support center. Not telling my story, just organizing intake forms, helping with logistics, quiet work. One evening, a woman about my age sat across from me, hands shaking, eyes hollow. "I don't know where to start," she said. I slid her a clipboard. "You already did." She looked at me, confused. "By showing up." She nodded slowly. That was enough. I didn't think about Daniel or Patricia often anymore. When I did, it wasn't with anger. It was with clarity. They were people who had confused dominance for love and obedience for peace. That confusion wasn't mine to correct. One morning, Denise asked me to sit in on a budget meeting with ownership. They wanted my input on risk management, on incident prevention, on training. I spoke calmly, clearly, without hedging. Afterward, one of the owners pulled Denise aside. "She has good judgment," he said. "Trust it." Denise smiled at me later. "See?" she said. I didn't respond. I was thinking about something else. How far I'd come without ever raising my voice. How much damage silence can do when it's forced. And how powerful it becomes when it's chosen. That evening, as I walked home along the boardwalk, I realized something quietly important. I wasn't rebuilding my life. I was living it. Fully, deliberately, without waiting for permission. There were still things ahead. Conversations, growth, maybe love, someday. On terms that didn't require me to disappear. But none of that felt urgent. Urgency belongs to fear. I wasn't afraid anymore. There were 2 chapters left, not to resolve anything, but to name what I'd learned, and to decide how much of it I wanted to carry forward. Because survival is only the beginning, and I was past that now. The first time I told the story out loud, it surprised me how little emotion it carried. I wasn't numb. I wasn't detached. I was simply no longer inside it. The support center asked if I would speak at a closed workshop in early March. No press, no recording. Just staff, volunteers, and a few women who were deciding whether to stay or leave situations they hadn't yet named as abuse. "You don't have to share details," the coordinator said. "Just whatever feels useful." I agreed. That night, I stood in a small room with folding chairs and fluorescent lights. I didn't rehearse. I didn't perform. I spoke slowly, plainly. I talked about how control rarely starts with violence, how it starts with rules that sound reasonable, with gratitude that becomes debt, with silence that gets praised as maturity. I talked about how the hardest moment isn't leaving. It's realizing you've been trained not to trust your own perception. I didn't mention Daniel Morales by name. I didn't need to. Afterward, no one clapped. They didn't need to. One woman stayed behind. Her name was Kara Simmons, early 30s, 2 kids. She twisted her wedding ring as she spoke. "Everyone tells me it's not that bad," she said. "But listening to you, I felt like you were describing my house." I nodded. "That's usually how people recognize it." She swallowed. "What if I leave and I'm wrong?" I answered carefully. "What if you stay and you're not?" She sat with that. I didn't give her advice. I gave her resources. That was the work now, not saving anyone, just refusing to participate in denial. At the hotel, my role expanded again. Denise trusted me with training protocols, incident response procedures, staff safety policies. "You're good at seeing patterns before they turn into problems," she said. I thought about that later. I'd had a lot of practice. One afternoon, Rachel Kim emailed me something unexpected. "I'm transitioning out of direct client work later this year," she wrote. "The firm is starting a survivor advocacy advisory panel. Would you consider joining?" I stared at the screen. "I don't have legal training," I wrote back. "You have lived expertise," she replied, "and boundaries." I took the weekend to think. On Sunday morning, I walked the beach alone. The wind was sharp, the sand firm under my feet. I thought about the woman I'd been a year earlier. apologizing for existing, measuring my worth by how little trouble I caused. I thought about how far away she felt, not erased, integrated. On Monday, I accepted. The first panel meeting was quiet, professional, focused on policy gaps, on what systems miss when they assume abuse looks a certain way. I spoke once about how often survivors lose credibility when they stop being emotional. Several heads nodded. That insight mattered. Later, one of the attorneys approached me. "You articulate things most people struggle to name," she said. I shrugged. I had to learn. Spring arrived slowly. The light lasted longer. The air softened. My family didn't re-enter my life. Not dramatically. Not secretly. They existed somewhere else. I heard through Marisol that Patricia had sold the house, that Daniel moved out of state for work, that they no longer spoke often. The information landed without impact. Distance had done what confrontation never could. One evening, I found myself sitting at my kitchen table, paperwork spread out, tea going cold, and realized something else. I wasn't angry anymore. Anger had been useful. It had propelled me forward when fear wanted me still, but I didn't need it now. What I felt instead was resolve, a steady, grounded sense that my life belonged to me, fully, without exception. The world hadn't become safer. I had become clearer. That clarity showed up everywhere, in how I spoke, in what I tolerated, in what I no longer explained. The final lesson arrived quietly, the way the important ones do. It came in the form of a question Denise asked me during a meeting. "Where do you see yourself next year?" I paused, not because I didn't know, because the answer no longer needed justification. "Here," I said, "doing work that makes harm harder to hide." She smiled. "That's a good place to be." It was. And for the first time, I understood something fully. The opposite of abuse isn't love, it's autonomy. And autonomy, once claimed, doesn't ask to be returned. There was one chapter left, not to tie anything up, but to leave a marker for myself and for anyone who needed to see what choosing yourself actually looks like when the noise is gone. I didn't mark the end with a celebration. There was no dinner, no toast, no symbolic gesture to tell the world something was finished. Endings like that belong to stories that need witnesses. This one didn't. It ended on a Tuesday morning in late April, while I was standing in line at the bank. The teller asked for my ID. I handed it over. She typed, paused, then smiled. "Everything's set, Ms. Morales." She slid the receipt toward me. I thanked her, folded the paper, and stepped outside into the sun. That was it. The last shared account closed. The final administrative tie severed. No drama, no phone calls, no reaction from anyone else. Just confirmation. I walked the long way home, past the boardwalk, past places that used to feel heavy. The ocean was calm. The air smelled like salt and coffee from an open cafe. I felt ordinary, and that felt like freedom. At home, my apartment was quiet. Light moved across the floor as the day shifted. I made lunch, ate it slowly, washed the dishes immediately instead of letting them sit. Small things. Chosen things. My phone buzzed once. A message from Rachel. "All finalized. You did well." I typed back. "Thank you for treating me like a person." She replied with a simple acknowledgement. "Always." That afternoon, I reviewed training materials for the support center panel. Language choices. Intake phrasing. How to ask questions that didn't imply blame. How to build systems that didn't collapse when someone stopped performing distress. It felt purposeful. Later, Denise stopped by my office. "We're expanding next quarter," she said. "More responsibility. I want you in the room when we plan it." I nodded. "Okay." She paused at the door. "You know, not everyone would have stayed this steady." I met her eyes. "I learned the cost of instability early." She smiled and left. That night, I sat on the floor by the window with my laptop open. I reread the account I'd written weeks earlier, the one I hadn't posted. I made a few edits, clarified a sentence, removed anything that sounded like justification. Then, I shared it. Not everywhere, just in one place, where people were already listening for themselves. I closed the laptop and waited. Nothing happened right away. That was fine. By morning, there were responses. Quiet ones, thoughtful ones. People recognizing themselves in the structure, not the spectacle. I replied to a few, Not to explain, just to acknowledge.
One message stood out.
I didn't know I was allowed to leave without being forgiven.
I stared at that sentence for a long time.
Then I wrote back, "You are."
That was enough. Weeks passed.
Life continued. Work grew. My role expanded. The panel work became routine, not heavy, not overwhelming. Integrated. I stopped scanning rooms for exits. I stopped rehearsing defenses. I stopped explaining why I needed space. My family remained absent. Not erased, just no longer central. And that was the final truth. Leaving didn't make me smaller. It didn't make me bitter. It made me precise. Precise about what I allow. Precise about what I build. Precise about who gets access to me. If you're hearing this and something in you feels familiar, let me say this clearly. You don't need a perfect plan. You don't need permission. You don't need to wait until it's unbearable. You only need to stop cooperating with your own disappearance. If this story stayed with you, take a moment to like it, subscribe, or leave a comment. Share the point where you realized staying silent was costing you more than leaving ever could. There are more stories like this, not about revenge, about clarity, about the quiet power of choosing yourself and not apologizing for it. This was mine. And it didn't end with them. It began with me.